Welcome back. Not all Canadians want to postpone retirement. For small business owners who have built their companies over the course of a lifetime, it can be really tough to walk away. I'm joined by Mark Wardell. He's the president and founder of Wardell Professional Development. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thanks, Patty.
Not everybody wants to walk away from their business. But what will happen when people have built a business up over their whole lifetime and the boomers who are now thinking, well, maybe I should get ready to sell it? What should they be thinking?
Well, first of all, it's fully 2/3 of all business owners that are planning on exiting their companies in the next 10 years. And that's unprecedented as far as I'm concerned. It's just an absolutely massive rush of business owners that are going to be looking to do something with their business. And the other issue coupled with this is the fact that 10% of those people actually have a written plan. So
that's not a big number.
No, so it's not just that we're going to see a shift to a buyer's market, which I think is a demographic certainty. We're actually going to see people that don't get a chance to sell their business at all, and I'm really quite worried about that. But I also know that Canadians are a strong group of entrepreneurs and that we can do something about that if we approach this thing right now and we hit it head on.
Well, when you say that many companies may be looking at selling their business, but they may not be able to, there will be people who are assuming that they're going to sell that business, and that's how they're funding their retirement.
Absolutely.
So what should they be doing that they're not doing?
Yeah. They need to understand value. They need to really understand what value itself actually is. And people that have some misconceptions around that. I had a fellow come into my office maybe just a few days ago, a couple days ago. He was convinced his business was worth about $10 million.
Of course he was.
Absolutely, because he'd seen other people selling their businesses, similar sort of sales, numbers like that. He was off by at least tenfold, maybe $1 million if he's lucky. And it's because he didn't understand, he didn't really grasp what value was inside a business.
Well, what was he missing?
Well, it's all about goodwill. It's all about a true, honest understanding of what goodwill is in a company. And goodwill, for your listeners, is it's what's left over after you get rid of the tangible assets. So you have this general market value of a company, you have the liquidation value of your company, and that what's left over is this thing called goodwill. And it's very misunderstood because goodwill really is the business. People focus on maybe I have a property.
The nuts and bolts?
Sure. That, well, maybe you bought the facility that you're in. The value of that building goes up. That's great. I'm excited for you, and it should. But understand that that's the real estate business. That's not the widget-making business. So people have to have a separation of that in their mind so that they can focus in the right area to honestly and significantly increase the value of that company.
What happens then if the goodwill is tied to the owner of the business as opposed to the business and the value out of the business itself?
Right. So there's basically 3 different types of goodwill, and that's what people have to get their heads around. So there's just as you alluded to, there's personal goodwill, which is tied to me or you, the business owner. That's the knowledge I have, the skills I have, the abilities I have, the connections I have in the community, all that stuff. And that's important for me to grow my company, except that it's not transferable, it's not sellable.
Right.
Right. And then there's individual goodwill that is very similar to the owner's goodwill, except that it's tied to key employees in the company. So if I hire a Joe or a Mary or a Bob and they're very good at what they do, then I maybe feel like to some degree I can take a step back. Unless, of course, Bob or Mary or Sue leave, in which case now I've got this problem all over again and I'm drawn back in. So the next level is what we call corporate or business goodwill. And this is goodwill. It's actually tied to the company itself. This is of highest value, and this is absolutely sellable. So this is the brand of the business. If it's in retail, it's the location of the business, but it's also the systems and the processes and the policies and all these things that make up the business itself. And that is where people have to put their energy and their focus.
So if you are actually thinking of selling your business 10 years down the road, and the goodwill is tied to you as the owner of the business, how do you transition from being owner goodwill to corporate goodwill?
Right. So first of all, it's all about time. Good old Benjamin Franklin said that time is money, right?
Yep.
Right.
We've been talking about that for a long time.
Yes, and I absolutely concur. So with your money, in your industry, for example, I can do 2 things. I can spend it or I can invest it, right? If I spend my money, I go out to a nice meal with my wife, or maybe you go out with your husband, you pay the bill, it's a one-to-one relationship, it's fair value for dollar, right? One-to-one kind of relationship. But when you invest it, you certainly hope and intend that over time you're going to get a long-term positive return on your money. That's the whole reason that we do this. The same thing is true for time in business. It's exactly the same thing. So as a business owner, if I sell a product, that's great. I mean, and I should be doing that. That's where the rubber hits the road. But it's a one-to-one relationship. I need to have some investment, however, where I maybe discover a better way to sell, a way to improve the ratio for selling so I sell more. If I
Yeah.
Suppose I took 1 hour and I did nothing but try to figure out how to save 10 minutes of time repeatedly every single day. That adds up to over a week a year. I mean, and that's driving value right there. And so that's the tool we use to climb what I call a value pyramid.
Okay, so let's talk about that value pyramid.
Sure.
What's at the bottom rung of it then?
Okay, so a value at the base is what we call an owner-driven business. So that's a business that's mostly personal goodwill. Everything is driven by the owner. But as we move up, we get to something called a personal or a people-driven business. And a people-driven business is mostly individual goodwill. Okay, there's key people. And so, like I said before, that's where a business owner often takes a step back and thinks that their job is done. Great, you know, my business is working just fine until, of course, a key employee leaves and they're pulled right back into the business.
Yeah.
Right, so the next level is a process-driven business, and that's where we talk about systems and policies and procedures, so that if a key employee leaves the company, at the very least, when you find a new person, they're going to be brought back in much more easily and much more rapidly into that business.
Because the business is sustainable.
Exactly.
Not based solely on the people.
Exactly.
It's based on the process.
Precisely. Yeah. But there's still one more level higher, and that's what we call a culture-driven business. And a culture-driven business is all about an environment of, I call it a culture of excellence, an environment where everybody is focused on trying to make the business a better place. And that, Toyota would be like the quintessential prime example of an environment that's driven by its culture. So when a new employee comes in, they're not just brought into the systems and the policies and the procedures of how this place runs, but they're brought into the very essence of how this company runs. They're sucked into the environment, and they become part of that organization, and that's a very exciting place to work, and of course it's a very strong kind of business model.
All right, then the question I have for you is, if less than 10% of the business owners who are going to be looking at selling their business within a decade don't have, or have a plan, that means 90% don't.
Right.
What's going to suggest to someone that they need to go and get this expertise to build the pyramid so that they can get the value out?
Right, well, it's like a light bulb that goes on in people's heads, really, I find. You know, when people understand that they actually have to build a turnkey operation. I mean, as a business owner, as all people, I think, we love to be needed. You know, and part of what, you know, I love to be needed by. Exactly.
Feel like you really add something to the bar.
Yes, and this is why people don't have succession plans, I believe. It's like why nobody has a will. Less than half Canadians have a will.
I know that.
Right?
I know that for a fact.
Absolutely. So, and it's the same kind of idea. We don't want to think about the end, right? No, I'm going to live forever. I'm going to run my business forever. This is never going to happen, right? But of course,
it is.
It is.
It's going to happen.
It's an absolute certainty, totally inescapable, right? So I find that the more I talk about this, the more I promote this idea, at some point, I had a client just the other day. We were talking about this very thing. He said, you know what? It was like a light bulb. It was just like that. I worked with him for maybe 6 months, 8 months, and all of a sudden he realized, I have to get the heck out of my own way. I am my own worst enemy. And until you realize that as a business owner, because you're responsible for growing your company, and that's great. But at some point, you have to take a step sideways, and you have to allow. It's like you're like children.
Yes.
You know, we can control and nurture our children and not allow them to make any mistakes in life, right?
Or you can help them.
Or we can help them to become their own.
Right.
And that is what we have to do as Canadians. We have to take that attitude, and if we do, we can solve this problem. Absolutely.
Now, we only have about a minute left.
Yes.
What are a couple of the things as a business owner I could do to get me on this trajectory?
Well, first of all, you know, as you go through your day, just think about value. Just think, what am I doing in my day? At the end of your day, what did I do today to increase the value of my company? Because it's how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? It's little tiny increments. And if you take these steps continuously, then you're going to find that ultimately your business does grow in value. So what can you do? Write things down. Write every single procedure you possibly can in your company, write it down. Get that framework, and then start to manipulate it and build it.
Now, does it matter the size of the company?
No, not at all.
It really doesn't.
No, we have clients with less than $1 million in sales. We have clients with well in excess of $50 million in sales and upwards. And it's exactly the same process. It's just simplified.
Now, do you think more people err on the side of thinking they've created more value, or do you think people actually think they've created less value and may be surprised on either end of the spectrum?
People typically think their business is worth more than it is. They typically do. But you know, my whole goal is to try to help them to make it worth what they really would like it to be worth.
Hey, that's a good place to end on. Okay, thank you so much.
Actually,
pleasure. Mark, that was great. That was very insightful, so particularly for small business owners who are watching this evening.
That's great.